Hello, sub-ID, and welcome to Module 6, Statistical Design and Planning. The goal of this module is to enhance your ability to do the following. Choose the best study design for your research, plan multiple types of studies, improve the rigor of your study through reducing bias and error and through careful assessment of variables, conduct hypothesis testing and power calculations, and to design and implement high-quality data collection approaches and data management. This is the structure of Module 6. We'll begin with research design and planning overall, and for descriptive, observational, and experimental studies specifically. Then we'll address how to improve the internal validity or rigor of your studies by statistical planning to reduce error and bias, and to ensure that you are adequately powered to test your hypothesis and obtain a meaningful effect in your study results. Finally, through survey design and data collection and management, we hope to help you improve both the internal validity of your study, as well as help you to ensure that your results will be as broadly representative as possible for your study design. First, we'll begin with topic 6.1, an overview of research design and planning. By the end of this topic, we expect that you will be able to define the process of epidemiologic reasoning that is necessary for studying health outcomes, to state the importance of study design in accomplishing your research, and begin to identify the types of study designs and the quality of evidence associated with each. In future topics, we will discuss each study design in depth. The foundation of epidemiologic inquiry or population health research is that disease is not randomly distributed in a population and that disease causation is multifactorial. This means that we can measure factors that influence the ways in which disease is distributed in a population, such as who gets the disease, where we see the disease, or when we're more likely or not to see it. Measuring the frequency and patterns of disease within populations or across populations is referred to as descriptive epidemiology. The second foundation is the knowledge that multiple factors interact to create an environment in which disease occurs. There is never just one single cause or determinant of a disease, typically. Understanding the factors that influence the prevention, occurrence, control, and outcome of the disease is the goal of analytic epidemiology. There are steps to the process of investigating the distribution and determinants of disease. First, we need to describe the cases of disease or the outcome and the population that is at risk by time, place, and person. This is descriptive research. Next, we develop a testable hypothesis based on what we've learned about the patterns of disease. We then test this hypothesis with an analytic study design in which we have comparison groups that can provide us information about the differences in those with and without the risk factor or the disease. Finally, we take the knowledge gained from our research, combined with the research of others, to apply our findings to create change in public health through interventions and policy change. In this process of reasoning, we ask ourselves, what is the disease, condition, outcome, or risk factor being studied? I will use the word disease or outcome interchangeably to refer to whatever health, condition, risk, or result you intend to study. Next, you must know who. Who has the disease in question? What do we know about who's at risk? Does the condition occur more or less often at a certain time, like a season of the year or after an event? That is the when. Where? Are there specific places in which we see the condition occur or not occur, such as a geographic region, or a setting like a school or hospital? And why or how? Do we know why or how the condition occurs? And then finally, so what? What is the impact of this condition on the population or public's health? Why should we investigate this condition? When we ask this who, what, where, when, and why, how, the what is the disease, condition, or any other health-related event that you want to understand. This can be specific biologic agents like a virus, diet and nutrition, behaviors and conditions, or any health-related condition for which you can create a case definition that is clear, specific, and measurable. We already know that this is difficult. Diet or food consumption is very hard to measure, and our definitions of conditions such as obesity are often too broad to apply to every individual. In an example like COVID, defining and measuring a case has been a huge obstacle to understanding the frequency and occurrence of COVID. Is a case counted as a person who has a positive antigen test or PCR test, which would be more stringent and specific, or as someone who has all of the symptoms of COVID, regardless of whether they have tested positive, given that not everyone can be tested? This is an important step in epidemiologic reasoning to define your case. We then have to characterize the cases and the population at risk by time, or when the cases occur, place, or where they occur, and by who becomes a case or is at risk of becoming a case. Descriptive epidemiology is this investigation of the frequency of events within and across populations, and the pattern of health events by time, place, and person. The second and third step in the epidemiologic process are to use your understanding of the patterns and frequencies of disease that you found in your descriptive studies or in other researchers' studies to develop testable hypotheses and then test these hypotheses using rigorously designed studies with comparison groups. We can get an understanding of why and how a condition occurs through descriptive studies, and in analytic studies, we can test hypotheses about the association of factors such as social and demographic characteristics, behaviors and risk factors, environmental exposures, policies, genetics and biology, and any other factors related with our outcome of interest. So how does study design fit into this inquiry, and why is it so important? Study design is your blueprint or roadmap to understanding how to change the distribution and determinants of health outcomes. It allows you to progress through the steps of epidemiologic reasoning that we just discussed, building evidence as you move from inquiry to public health action. How do we choose which study design to use for our research? Our choice will be based on our research question or hypothesis and the stage of the research topic, while balancing the validity and quality of evidence we can gain from a study design with our ability to conduct the research efficiently and to generalize it to the broader population, as well as on practical and ethical considerations of conducting the research. Your hypothesis or research question, if you do not have a hypothesis yet, will affect the study design you choose, as will the stage of the research topic in the field. What do we know? Do we already understand the distribution and patterns of disease, so we're ready to move on to estimate relationships between risk factors and disease? Or are we still trying to understand who has the outcome, risk, or behavior? Your goal and the amount of existing evidence will determine whether you need a descriptive or analytic design, and what we know about the condition may determine which an analytic design as well. I like to use this figure to show how study designs are primarily broken into two groups. descriptive studies, case reports and case series, ecological or surveillance prevalence studies, and sometimes cross-sectional, and analytic studies, which are broken into observational and experimental studies, and also include cross-sectional design, case control and cohort, and in the experimental, a quasi-experiment or a randomized control trial. And we'll cover all of these study designs in the next few topics of Module 6. Descriptive study designs are most often used for discovering and monitoring the frequency and patterns of conditions, surveillance of conditions and risk factors to identify trends and plan for resources and interventions, and to generate hypotheses about disease causation. They typically lack an a priori hypothesis in that the intention is to discover rather than to prove associations. The major bias you encounter in descriptive studies is the ecological fallacy, which we'll talk about in topic 6.2. Analytic study designs seek to identify characteristics that are associated with a health condition and can be used to generate hypotheses and to test a specific hypothesis. Analytic studies use a comparison group and follow-up time to identify associations, which can help to provide an understanding of temporality, that an exposure comes before a disease condition arises, but we cannot use them to prove that an exposure causes a disease. Analytic studies are used to understand causal associations, test hypotheses, and to test, refine, and target prevention and treatment. To better understand whether you need to use a descriptive or analytic study design, you can ask yourself these questions. Do we know the patterns of the condition already? Do we have a hypothesis? Are we ready to test associations? If the answer is no to these questions, we should start with a descriptive study. While I have included, again, cross-sectional studies in the analytic group, they're often used to explore patterns and associations and generate hypotheses as well. So they may be used in a descriptive or in an analytic process. You can distinguish most descriptive and analytic studies, including this cross-sectional study, by whether or not there is a comparison group. Next, in deciding which study design to use, we have to consider the validity and quality of evidence that the study design can produce and balance that with the efficiency of the study and the resources we have to conduct the study. The validity and quality of evidence in studies depends on the type of design, how rigorously we execute that study, and our ability to generalize our results to the broader population of interest. Internal validity in a research study refers to the absence of bias. We ask, can we believe the study results? This depends on whether we've reduced bias and error in the design of our study, implemented our study with adherence to protocols and with thorough training of our study staff, and conducted our analyses in a way that reduces bias and error and maximizes our ability to detect an effect. External validity, or generalizability, refers to how well we can apply our results to a broader population or to other populations. How well does the design and the sample of individuals we included represent other populations? This is important in that we want our research to affect the greater good and as broad a population as possible. The issue is that there's often a trade-off between these two types of validity. The more stringent your criteria for including people in a study, and the more controlled your study is, often with experiments, the less we're able to take our results and say that we would likely find the same results in the broader population. This can't be true if we've excluded many people from our study to reduce bias, or have created experimental conditions that don't reflect real life. This figure shows the strength of evidence that each type of study design can contribute to the overall scientific evidence on a topic. You can see here that descriptive studies, while less rigorous and contributing evidence, are the foundation upon which we must build analytic studies. Then case control, cohort, and randomized control trials have greater evidence strength, and a meta-analysis contributes by identifying and evaluating the quality of all evidence in a particular topic. This slide shows how epidemiologic study designs rank in terms of internal validity, or the extent to which we can believe our study results. Experiments in which the researcher controls the exposure and there is at least one control group have the highest internal validity when executed properly. Internal validity decreases as we move down this list. Ask yourself, why is a comparison group so important to internal validity? Consider this question as you move through Module 6. There's often a cost to internal validity, and as I mentioned, that is that the studies with the highest internal validity are often those in which the conditions of the study are not reflective of conditions in the real world. Therefore, once you've established this strong evidence, you often need to conduct additional studies to understand how your results would fare in real-world conditions. This is why we may do intervention trials or community trials. In addition, analytic studies with comparison groups and carefully controlled conditions are often more expensive, more difficult to conduct, and take much greater time and resources to complete than studies that are less rigorous. Now, a short exercise. Imagine you want to measure the association between dietary intake and body composition. How would you do this in a descriptive surveillance study or a cross-sectional survey? What measures would you use? What would it cost? Would it be easy or hard to do? How resource intensive would it be? And how long might it take? Then think, what would the quality of evidence be, and how well would these results represent your broader population of interest? After you've thought through the survey or cross-sectional way of answering that question, then imagine that you're studying the same research question, but you plan to do it in a state-of-the-art laboratory. Ask yourself the same questions. How might you be able to measure body composition and food intake differently than in the survey? How might that change your quality of evidence? How would this affect cost, time, and resources? And finally, how well would the results of this study represent your broader population of interest? The goal of this exercise is to think through different ways of approaching the same research question based on what resources, time, and goals you may have in generalizing your results. Neither of these approaches is bad, and both of them can answer your research question. There are just different ways of balancing that quality of evidence that you'll obtain with your ability to conduct the study as well as generalize your results. So again, we will discuss each of these aspects of choosing study design in more depth throughout Module 6 as we discuss the specific designs. I've included a few slides here with tables that reflect the characteristics, strengths, and weaknesses of each study design for your reference. We'll be discussing these more in depth as the module progresses, but I wanted you to be able to have these slides to go back and refer to as needed. And again, these are for your reference. In summary, study design selection is an important part of epidemiologic reasoning and requires consideration of multiple factors, including your research question, resources and cost, practicality, and important balance between internal validity and the ability to generalize to your broader population. Thank you.